Star YouTube channel. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the vulnerability response and patching. I've got some question from the community asking that what is the difference between the vulnerability response and patching? Is it something, when you talk about vulnerability response, and people might consider it might just work on the patching part, but of course patching is one of the tasks that can be taken in remediating a given vulnerability, but that's not the only. We'll talk about all those details here. What is a patch management, and also we will talk the vulnerability response. Welcome everyone. This is Mohammed Rashid Kamal. I am the ServiceNow architect working on the ServiceNow ITSM, ITBM, governance, risk compliance, and also the security part. All right, so without taking time, we're gonna go ahead and talk about, by the way, if you are new to my channel, ServiceNow Star YouTube channel, make sure you San Diego release is just currently released by the ServiceNow. It came with a lot of new features that we have never seen before. So we will also talk about that in the coming days. So stay tuned. Now we're gonna go ahead and talk about what a vulnerability response is. So a vulnerability response. All right. So let's just give a couple of minutes for some of you to join us. And all right, now we're gonna go ahead and talk. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, welcome to the ServiceNow Star. All right, so here with the vulnerability response, and by the way, when we say patching is not just the only thing that you will find in vulnerability response. Definitely, there are a number of things that can address the ServiceNow vulnerability response. So what you see here is on the left, you have the application navigator. So on that application navigator, you'll see some modules that will help you to navigate and work on your vulnerability response. All right, so here is the vulnerability response application module, and under that you have got the vulnerable item. If there is any active vulnerability, you will take a look at that one as well. And now here is the administration part. The administration part of the vulnerability response, primarily on the application side, the assignment rules. The assignment rules means whenever a new vulnerability is created in the system, you're going to assign those vulnerabilities to, could be users or groups. So that is how and where you're going to set the assignment rule. And move on to the vulnerability calculator. So the vulnerability calculator is something mainly depend on the client. So where you can put the calculator where based on the severity or also based on your tunable scanned data, and there is different calculators that you can apply on it, so that can calculate your vulnerability. All right, and let's go ahead and remediation target. So remediation target is something really important that can help you to determine how long will it take you to remediate a given vulnerability. So that also result to SLA, which is the service level agreement that you're going to bid with. Let's say a given vulnerability might link it to a patch management, and that patch management must be done, for example, in 10 days. So When you assign it to a vulnerability analyst, so the vulnerability analyst or the security team should work on that vulnerability in order to remediate it. Now, the difference between patching and vulnerability. Of course, there is patching is part of a vulnerability response. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the vulnerable item here, the compile function market. Now, let me go ahead and see if I can find anything that relate to patch. All right, there's no any known vulnerability in my database that I have got 8 records, but none of them is gonna showing me that is related, the summary is related to patching. But let's go ahead and take a look at one of the vulnerability here, arbitrary Java code exception, the arbitrary Java code exception. Now, this vulnerability, you can see that the number is right there and the source is manual. I manually created, and the risk rating is 3 medium and the risk score is 40. Now, this vulnerability is tied to a vulnerability library, what we call it CVE, Common Vulnerability Enumeration. This is a library of vulnerability. Those are known vulnerabilities that are till these days, and you can see that is tied to that one. One important thing, you see that configuration item. So it doesn't have a configuration item. The configuration item is really important because let's say you may have thousands of configuration item, and if you are tying your configuration item to your vulnerability, you can apply priorities. Let's say if a given configuration item has a vulnerability, the risk of loss might be very high, so you need to prioritize and fix that one first than some other vulnerability that may be already there, but it may give you some time to take care. So those are some of the things that you need to go ahead and carefully design your linkage between the configuration management database and also your vulnerability. I see a couple of people are joining us. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the ServiceNow Star. We are talking about the vulnerability response and as well as patch management here from the ServiceNow Star. All right, so patch management is part of the vulnerability response. You do vulnerability response, and that's not the only thing that you need to do in vulnerability response, because vulnerability response encompasses a lot of things. Let's say your scanner, what I have right here is a tunable scanner that scans the environment where you have your configuration items, right? So you got that, and then after that you're gonna go ahead and start investigation. And at time you might have some vulnerability that are a false positive. You might go ahead and check that false positive, and sometimes you might go ahead and request exception because of fix may not be available, or you might wait for some patching. So because of that, you might go ahead and request an exception. So that is also part of that. And the other important thing here I want to point out is that the difference or the similarity between the vulnerability response and security incident. When we say security incident, security incident is after you got that incident, right? After you got that security incident, or you're gonna go ahead and work on it to prevent further problem or further issues. But when it comes to vulnerability, this vulnerability is it's a proactive measure, okay? You're going to do a proactively see your environment and see if there is any configuration issue. Maybe when you're set up your AWS environment, you might make some S3 database, right? You might make it, you might configure that S3 environment, and you set it to public, and that can be detected by your vulnerability scanners, and it can tell you that, hey, there is a configuration issue right there, and you set this kind of database, you set it to public. All right, so those are some of the scanner's job for you, and then what you can do is that from there you can go ahead and work on it to fix those kind of issues. So the difference between the security incident and the security incident is more of once the incident is happened, you go ahead and fix it. But when it comes to vulnerability response, you are proactively preventing an incident could not to happen an incident. Now, some of the important sections here in the vulnerability response is that there is the vulnerability. We talked about the importance of the configuration item, which is the physical and logical component of your infrastructure that currently or soon will be under the configuration management. So that's what we call it, configuration item. So it's really important to tie your vulnerability to your configuration management item. Now, your vulnerability would have a summary, which is arbitrary. Here is arbitrary Java code execute via the exposed method. And that vulnerability will have a severity and also the V3 score, which is the vulnerability score, and also V2 score. And very important field here is exploit exist. What I mean exploit exist is that it helps you to flag or indicate your vulnerability had at least one exploit on a public exploit aggregator. So that is really important. And if there is no exploit, being no means your risk score will be lesser than the risk score that has exploit exist. And at time you might have a vulnerability and you may not have your skill levels, exploit skill level or an exploit attack vector. All of that are really important to understand and see in your vulnerability section here. So the initial detection is telling you that what are some of the detail, like the DNS name, the net BIOS name. So those are the IP address. So these fields are really important for you to create a linkage between your configuration database and your vulnerability. When I say that is that you have got a CI lookup rule. These are the rules are primarily you can link based on a field, or also you can create a script, custom script, or you can use one of the out of the box script to link your vulnerable item using an IP address or a net BIOS name or a DNS name. It's really critical and very important to note that one as well. So those are some of the important part. Now, you might be asked, what are the states of a given vulnerability? So when you have when you have a vulnerability, the first important thing is you're gonna go ahead and put it under investigation. So you'll go ahead and put it under investigation. You'll save that, and once you start investigating this vulnerability, you might go ahead and create a security incident, or you might await implementation. All right, you might await implementation, or also you request an exception. Now, if I feel this, once I completed my investigation, I'll go ahead and resolve it. The scanner could also resolve for you if the problem is fixed. If the problem is fixed, it might already go ahead and resolve your incident. And I'm just gonna put letter R, and I will go ahead and resolve it. Now, once it's resolved, it will go ahead and the form is gonna go ahead and it could be, you can reopen it if there is any new problems or exist, or any vulnerability exists, or you can also go ahead and create a security incident using that UI action. Now, let's go ahead and create a security incident. So there's a linkage here. What it's going to tell you is what is the affected CI. Right now we don't have, because I didn't tie to a configuration item. Right, so the second field is the vulnerability, and this is the common vulnerability enumeration. So you got 2007-6382 and the short description, and you also have the description of the vulnerability, and from there you can go ahead and create a security incident for a given vulnerability. So to conclude our today's live session on the importance of or comparing vulnerability response with patch management. Patch management is one per sale and component of vulnerability response. And vulnerability response is not just only being a patch management, so it's really broad. When you do vulnerability response, there are business critical vulnerabilities, vulnerability resolved in the last scan, all of that are part of your vulnerability response. But when it comes to patch management, it's primarily focused on the patch being available, or if there is any attempt to apply your existing environment. So you might use for patch different tools that can help you to deploy your patch, like the Ultrasis or SCCM. Those are some of the tools that you can use in order to apply your patch into your environment. And also, what is really important to talk about patch management is that, is there any failed patch or installed patch? Those are the two key measures you can go ahead and use in the vulnerability response. So once I create my vulnerability response security incident from the vulnerability response, you'll have that security incident response number, SIR number, and also you'll take a look at that. The business impact calculated will be applied as well. So that's conclude today's discussion, and thank you for being with us. On the next episode, we'll talk about some of the new features that we have in San Diego ServiceNow release. In San Diego ServiceNow release, we'll go ahead and talk about those. It's really important to note in the San Diego. So as you can see right there, my ServiceNow is in Quebec. I'm gonna upgrade this one to Rome in San Diego. Actually, bypass Rome, and I'll go ahead and upgrade it to San Diego. All right, so now in order to upgrade your instance, see that I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and click here actually in my name tab. Then under that, it will go ahead and tell you that upgrade instance. So in order to upgrade your instance, and then this is the latest one, San Diego release note. That's the San Diego, which is the latest one. There's a ROM patch. Now I'm gonna go ahead and directly upgraded my instance to San Diego release, and I'm sure there will not gonna be any data loss. I'm just gonna go ahead and let it to upgrade. All right, so the upgrade is in progress. So next time we'll go ahead and meet you live from Washington DC. We'll talk about some of the new release in San Diego that are primarily on the vulnerability response, and as well as governance, risk, and compliance. Those are some of key functionality that I'm going to talk recently, hopefully. And here are some of the ServiceNow new release regarding in San Diego about the manufacturing vulnerability response. So it's really important to note that ServiceNow for manufacturing to help organizations streamline operation and boost the productivity and maximize operational technology. So those are some of the new thing that we're going to talk, and operational technology, and here also the core operations as well, and the factory workers. All are these benefited from the new release of the ServiceNow San Diego release. Here is, all right, so this is the digital map of your organization, can gain greater visibility of your manufacturing. All right, so this help you to improve your visibility, That means it help you to contextually, view your organizational technology systems across the board. And you'll also benefit from the digital workflow that ServiceNow has, and the vulnerability management that we talked about, how you can manage your vulnerability, all of that. So, all right, so that's all we have, and my ServiceNow developer instance is the instance upgrade is in progress. So once that completes, we'll come back in few days and we'll talk about the new release of the ServiceNow. And by the way, today what we have talked about is the patch management and vulnerability response. And we have talked about that patch management is part of the vulnerability response, and vulnerability response is just really it's not only just patch management, it also encompasses a lot of things. So patch is normally whenever you have a problem, okay, it's a reactive measurement. So you got a problem and you do patch. But vulnerability response is primarily, it's a proactive work, proactively fixing a given problem or a given issue. All right, that's conclude today's episode. Until we see each other on the next one, I'm Mohammed Rashid Kamal. Until then, have a great day, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.